Hello and welcome to the course. In this course, we're going to learn about the Scrum Framework, the core framework without the practices and techniques that are usually added to Scrum projects. This is basically based on the PSM I exam. And one important thing here to note is that the whole course is based on the newest version of the Scrum Guide 2020 and the newest version of the PSM exam, which was released in January 2021. So what it means is that some of the things may not be 100% compatible with what you can see in some other resources, in some books, articles, and so on, because they may be based on the previous versions of the Scrum Guide or on a totally different perspective to Scrum. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's say we have a team of developers, okay? A very common problem that we have working in projects is that every once in a while, someone from the customer side comes to you asking for some changes, a new feature to be added as soon as possible, or changes to an existing feature and so on, which is okay. But the main problem is that there's more than one. Different people come to you, and each of them has their own priorities, and those priorities are not compatible with each other. And sometimes even the things that they ask you are not compatible with each other. So it doesn't matter what you do, you're always being blamed by some of those people, which is really terrible. It's very distracting. You're there to do your professional work, which is creating a piece of software. So there's a common solution for this problem. This is the solution that exists in different ways in all methodologies and frameworks. And it's about creating someone or a group of people who's responsible for dealing with those stakeholders. And in Scrum, we have the same approach, that there's one person, and we call that person the product owner. The product owner is the one who's responsible for staying between you and everyone else who has a say in the product. Anything that they want, they go to the product owner. The product owner talks to them, resolves conflicts, which is a very important thing. Two different people asking for two different things that are not compatible with each other. Processes everything, prepares it, and then brings it to you as the developers. That makes everything a lot easier for you. You have only one source about the features you're going to add to the product and even their priorities. So what happens? Now imagine that you're the product owner. You're talking with many people. You're extracting the features. What do you do with them? You will certainly create a list, a to-do list of all different things that you want to have in the product. And naturally, as soon as you create the list, you automatically start ordering the list based on their priorities, based on their importance, the value they add to the product, and so on. Therefore, we have this concept here, the to-do list for the project. Something else here happens, which is again common for all projects, is that there's an objective for every project, and it's more than the sum of those items. What it means is that when you have all those items, the final goal of the project, the goal that you have for the product, may not be implied there. Or at least if it is implied, it's not clear enough. So it's a good idea to define that goal and add it to the list. Something there to remind us all the time that that's the objective we have. That's why we are doing all of these things. And this is a great practice in every type of project. We always need to be aligned with that final objective. In different frameworks, methodologies, they have different names for it, but the concept is the same. Okay? Now, in Scrum, we have a special names for these. The to-do list that we have is a list of items for the product, and we call it the product backlog. And the objective for the product, that's called the product goal. These are the terms that we have in Scrum. You know the concepts, and now you know the terms as well. So the product goal is part of the product backlog. The product backlog is a list of the things we want to do, an ordered list, plus the product goal. Now, these lists are usually long, and when you start working as a developer, it may be distracting to have the whole list in front of you all the time. Then that's what many of us do as well. I've been doing that a long time. I have a really, really long to-do list, and it's even frightening when I want to look at it all the time. So what I do is that every week I pick the most important or most urgent things from that to-do list and put them in a temporary list for the week. And during the week when I want to work, I don't go and check my main list. I only check my temporary list, the weekly list. That makes it easier. That helps me focus on the short term. And I also don't forget about the long-term plan, because every week I go back to my main list to pick the items for the weekly list. So here for the developers in a Scrum project, that's the same. The product backlog is too much. That's distracting if they want to use it in their day-to-day work. So they create a short-term to-do list for themselves. That helps. They talk to the product owner and pick a number of items, normally from the top of the product backlog because those items are ordered, and they put it in the short-term to-do list. Now, there's something here that can be very helpful. With the same reasoning that we need to have a product goal, we can also have a short-term goal here. That really helps. That's a short-term, small goal that brings us closer to the main product goal. And during the week, for example, if it's a week, my to-do list is weekly, but in the project, it's usually more than a week. But anyway, during that time period, they always check their short-term objective to make sure that their interpretation of those items is correct. It helps everything to be aligned with our goals, not as isolated, separate, random things. Because then you will be lost. You will be just doing, I don't know, things that don't add enough value. All right, so this is the concept that we have, and we go on with those short-term windows of working. When we want to start a new one, we check the product backlog, pick a number of items, create the short-term list. We work on that. We will create our outputs, and at the end of that window, we will evaluate everything. We will evaluate the product that we have created and the way we've been working. Based on that, and based on the feedback that we get for all of those things, we will make adjustments to the product backlog. We may add new items. We sometimes remove items. We may make changes to the existing items. We may change the order of them, anything that can happen. And that's the main purpose here. So we do that, and then for the next period of time, again, we will go to the product backlog, pick a number of items, add them to the short-term list, create something, and at the end, we will evaluate everything and make adjustments to the product backlog. And we go on like that. Now, in Scrum, these windows are called sprints. One sprint at a time. That's how we work in Scrum. In other agile systems, they may be called iterations or time boxes or other things. All right, so coming back here, we have the terms now. The term for the iteration was a sprint in a Scrum, and therefore the list that we have for the sprint, it's very natural to call it the sprint backlog. And obviously the goal can be called the sprint goal. So these are the new terms we have here. The other thing that I can tell you at this time is that this sprint backlog can be expanded a little bit. Normally, usually it is expanded, and you can create different columns in it, to do, doing, done, for example, if you want. And while you're doing that, you can also decompose those items into technical things that you want to do. You detail, you plan. Actually, that's a type of planning. And you see, our planning is continuous. We don't add all those details to the product backlog because then the product backlog will be huge, extremely huge, with too much detail. And practically for something you want to do in 6 months from now, there's no point in spending a lot of time and detailing that because no one knows what's going to happen. Maybe in 2 weeks from now, you want to remove that. You don't want to work on it. So what's the point? You will only plan it when it's time to work on it. We will do all of these, and then we start working. And after a while, when we are done, that thing is finished and it can be part of our product. So, for example, if you have a piece of software and it was version 5.2.3, now it is 5.2.3.001, something like that. It's a new version of your product. You may not release it to the public, but it's still a version, at least internally. It's an increment of the product. And in Scrum, it's just called increment. That's simpler, that's shorter. Now, when you put something there are two main reasons here to have a very special consideration. One reason is that we want to show that increment to our customer, to our end users, and so on, and receive feedback. That feedback is very helpful because it can show us the way forward. It can tell us what to do with our product backlog and what to create in the next sprints. And when we want to receive feedback based on that, we really need the increment to be done. We need everything that we put into that increment to be really done without problems. Otherwise, we cannot rely on the feedback. That's one reason. And the other reason is that if you don't completely finish everything and put something there, for example, it's not properly integrated or it's not compatible with other units there. What I mean is that you've not done all the tests, including user acceptance testing, then sooner or later you will have problems with that. And when you have problems, you have to go back and fix it. And it's always more difficult to fix it in the future. Because right now you're working on it, you know exactly what's happening there. You can spend, for example, 2 more hours and completely finish it and then put it there. But if you don't do it in 2 months from now, you will run into some mysterious problem. And you may have to spend hours after hours just finding out that it was because of this. And then again, you have to spend a lot of time understanding how it was working and then fix it. So it's not justifiable. It's a lot easier if we really commit to having 100% done items when we put them into the increment. And that's why we have a definition of done. The definition of done is a description of what we expect from the increment when we say that it's done. And obviously the items that we put into the increment. Being done is more than what happens with single items because it's also about the integration of each item with the other items. All right. We're almost done with this lesson. This is one of the longer lessons in this course. Going back here, you remember that I told you at the end of each sprint, we have an evaluation of the product and the process. When it comes to the product, what we actually evaluate is the increment, the latest increment. We evaluate it with the customers, with the end users, and so on. All right, so these are some of the people that work in a Scrum project, the developers who do the actual work, and the product owner who solves millions of problems when it comes to stakeholders. And then we have a few other needs that are not easily satisfied with these people. For example, we are using a framework here, Scrum. We have a way of working. Scrum is simple, but it's not easy. There are lots of things to know, and there are also a lot of techniques that you need. The developers may not know exactly how to handle a project, for example, the database design in an adaptive system. It's different a little bit. So they need some help. They need help from someone who knows exactly how Scrum and Agile in general work, what type of techniques they may need, or the product owner, for example, they also need a lot of techniques. I told you that they need to order the product backlog, but how do you order the product backlog? In a certain project, you may have doubts. It's a great idea to have someone in your group where you can go to that person and ask your questions. That's one reason. And the other reason is that we always have problems in projects. You run into problems and obviously you first try to solve it yourself, but sometimes it's not enough. In order to solve it, you have to go outside the borders of the project and deal with a lot of people, and you need to know how to deal with those people. Not everyone is good at that. So you need someone to help you remove impediments. These two, removing impediments and helping with techniques and so on. These are the two most important reasons for having a third person in a Scrum project. And that person is called the Scrum Master. Okay, so these are the people, the Scrum team, and I told you about a lot of things in a Scrum, and I hope you have the big picture now. As an example, I just remember this. You remember I told you about, let me go back here. Yeah. We have a product backlog with a product goal and a sprint backlog with a sprint goal, right? So think about this course. The course as a whole is the product, and this lesson can be like the output of one sprint. Now, for the whole course, we have a certain goal to learn the basics of the core Scrum framework and being prepared for the PSM exam. That's the product goal. Now, when we come to the sprint goal in this lesson, I don't keep thinking about everything that I have to cover in this course because that's very distracting. Instead of that, I'm focused only on the scope of this lesson, on the sprint goal, sprint backlog. And for this lesson, I also have a goal. The goal is to create a simple foundation for the next lessons. Have an overview of everything without going through the details. And that really helps me because if it's up to me, I would go on and go through a lot of details. But now that I have that goal, I try to stay focused. Don't go through those details. Let's keep it simple for now because it will be overwhelming. Let's create that foundation. You have the time to do it in the next lessons. That's how the sprint goal can help. Okay, so we're done with this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about Agile. What does it mean to be Agile?